We're going to be talking about Ipswich Town. So first of all, we hope is going to be a weekly chat, sitting down talking about town, transfer rumours, how things are going in the summer. And obviously I guess today we'll have to start with the story that my man Stuart Watson, man sitting to my left, broke this morning about season tickets. Significantly down on the season, Stu. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well the figure we're told is around 15% down on this time last year, which is around 2,000 fans that have not renewed, or certainly the figure is down 2,000. So continues a worrying trend, doesn't it? It's on top of the 1,000 that they lost last summer. So 3,000 fans in 2 years off the back of those playoffs. It's nearly a quarter of their season ticket holders. They've gone from 13,000 to around 10,000. So a worrying trend, and I think that kind of sums up the growing apathy around the football club at the moment.
And I mean, obviously looking at the season just gone, it was a dire season, the worst in 58 years, I believe. Can you say any kind of chinks of light as we go into the summer?
It's difficult to find too many positives, we have to say, because I don't think the budget, Marcus Evans' budget, is going to suddenly increase significantly. Mick McCarthy's tactics have obviously come under the spotlight in terms of some perceived negativity and the lack of entertainment value. So what's going to change going forward next season is hard to see. I mean, the only positive that I would highlight is that there's a golden chance now to have a real clearing of the decks with the playing squad. A number of players have been released, a number of loanees have departed. I think even if they manage to move on the likes of Kevin Brew and Brett Pittman, then you've got a significant sort of portion of the wage bill for Mick McCarthy to play with, and maybe he can just freshen things up a little bit and sort of get people excited again. But it's a big ask.
You mentioned obviously Mick McCarthy. One of the key questions going into the summer, and certainly in the past couple of months of the season, is whether or not he's going to be here next season. We did a poll towards the end of the season, which the majority of people who took part, and you can never really tell obviously in terms of how many people disillusioned, I guess, tend to take part in these polls, but certainly the majority there wanted Mick to go. I think probably there was a time not too long ago where it looked as if we might be heading for a parting of the ways, but now the noises coming out in the club are potentially that he's here for another season, aren't they? What do you think?
Yeah, I sort of got to the stage where I was giving up trying to guess. It's the first question that everyone asks me when I'm out and about: is Mick going to be here? A few months ago, I was pretty convinced that we were heading for a parting of the ways, a fairly sort of mutual agreement between Marcus and Mick. Mick had, as early as sort of January, February time, if I remember, was saying in his press conferences that I'll be considering my future in the summer, and the last thing I want is to be walking out in front of a half-empty stadium in front of supporters that don't want me to be here. Now, I don't really know what's kind of changed from that point onwards, but increasingly, as we neared the end of the season, Mick there was more fighting talk from him. I think the more criticism he faced, I think it sparked that that thing in Mick where he kind of wants to prove people wrong. He's got that stubborn, belligerent streak in him, as we know. And as you say, all the noises are at the moment that Mick he certainly signalled his intent to stay on and rebuild the squad this summer and prove a few people wrong. Now, what Marcus Evans is thinking, we don't really know, do we? Because we don't hear a great deal from Marcus. We've had his one programme piece around Christmas time in which he outlined his 5-point plan about focusing on the youth team and entertaining football. For my money, I'm not sure Mick ticks enough of those boxes in terms of that 5-point plan, but Mick wants to stay. I guess ultimately the season tickets might have a big say in how Marcus feels. My reading of it at the moment, and it is just a reading of it, is that Marcus will stick with Mick. I think he sees him as a pretty safe pair of hands for his limited sort of spending approach at the moment. There would be a fear that if they went down a different route, manager-wise, that it would be too big a risk, too big a gamble, and they could go the same way as Blackburn have done this season, for example. So I think he'll get the next sort of 6 months at the start of this season coming. And then, if the trend that we've got at the moment of fans walking away continues, then it might just fall Marcus's hand. So big summer ahead.
Absolutely. So there you go. Then we think Mick's here to stay next season. You have to let us know what you think about that on the Twitter and on the Facebook pages, and also on our website. You can comment as well. So we've talked about Mick, the manager. Now let's turn to the players and the wage bill. Obviously they've released quite a few players recently. They are starting to clear some of the wage bill. We heard this week reportedly that Brett Pittman and Kevin Brew have been told they can leave if they can find a club. What are your thoughts on that going forward? Are they clearing the decks for some big moves this summer?
Yeah, I think it's key that they freshen up this squad. Mick's kind of mentioned it himself that after 4 or 5 years in a job, people perhaps get bored of hearing the same things from you, seeing the same things from you as a manager. So the trick of a manager that's in a job for a long period of time is recognising when a team's going stale and reinventing it before you hit that point. Sir Alex Ferguson obviously was the master of doing that. You know, he wasn't afraid to move people on. At the time, people think, you know, you've done it perhaps prematurely, but I think he knew that in order to get his dressing room sort of fully behind him and on board, that you needed to kind of keep reinventing a team every few years. And I think Ipswich are certainly at that point now. Some of the stalwarts of that playoff season, we're going to start seeing move on. Daryl Murphy's obviously moved on. Christoph Berra's now departed from that team. So it's important that we start to see a new core of the team coming together. I think Adam Webster will be a big part of the spine of the team for the years to come, but they certainly need another sort of box-to-box midfielder. That's got to be fairly high in the priorities. And replacing Murphy with a focal point of the attack. It's not just been his goals that they've missed, but you know, that physical presence and someone who can make it stick and fight up front. So they're the top 2 priorities for me: a Murphy replacement and a proper box-to-box midfielder, be that Emir Hughes signing or somebody else.
Indeed, on that note, Stuart's just been putting the finishing touches to his kind of review of the season / analysis of what's needed coming up next season. You can read that tomorrow in the East Anglian Daily Times, and obviously check it out online as well tomorrow. Stewie, now we're into what we call silly season on the sports desk. Transfer rumours start. Football's basically gone on holiday for a month, so we get that filled with transfer rumours. So many around there now, obviously through Twitter and Facebook. It's so easy to start a rumour, so it's really hard to kind of see the wood for the trees in terms of that. If I just throw a couple at you, we've had so far in terms of being linked with Town. Tom Adeyemi is probably the one that's been out there the most this week. Thoughts on that? He obviously scored for Rotherham against Town. Looks a good player, good midfielder. Is he the sort of player that Town A could use, and B, are they realistically in a position where they can sign a player like that?
Yeah, I mean, he'd tick a few boxes. I certainly think if you look at Mick McCarthy's record of signing players, from what we're told, he's first and foremost he's a good character off the field, which is a must for Mick, as we know. He is that box-to-box type. He's had a bit of a flurry of scoring goals towards the end of the season, as you rightly say. Scored the winner against Ipswich as well. Mick does tend to sign players that play well against Ipswich. We've seen it before with Adam Webster and others. He's got links to this area, I think originally from Norwich. I mean, Norwich are supposedly interested in him as well, so that would be interesting if it became a battle. He's another one that seems to be out of Neil Warnock's plans at Cardiff, just like Emir Hughes. He was sent out on loan in the season just gone. Neil's trying to sort of forge his own team there, so maybe he's the backup option. If they can't strike a deal for Emir Hughes, then he might be the sort of the next one in the list, would be my reading of it at the moment. But yeah, certainly ticks a few boxes. Again,
you'd have to let us know what you think about that. Let us know, comments, all that sort of stuff on Twitter and Facebook. Another one linked this week is Nathan Thomas, a defender, captain of Swindon. Obviously Swindon relegated to League 2. Town, you'd think, have to strengthen somewhere along the back line. Nathan Thomas, is that a sort of name you could see coming to Town?
I have to be honest, I don't know too much about that one or too much about him as a player, but looking to the lower leagues is certainly something I think a lot of fans would like to see them do now. Last season, spending sort of sensible fees on players that can be developed is part of this 5-point plan that Marcus has talked about. I think that's pretty sensible. We've seen with Adam Webster what an investment he's been at. 700 grand it came obviously from a League 2 club, taken that step up in his stride. I don't think the gap between the lower divisions and the Championship is as big as it has been in the past. Even players from the National League, we've seen how Danny Rowe's taken that step up in his stride. So I wouldn't read too much into being too worried about players sort of playing at that sort of level. And I think that's, to compete with the bigger budget sides in the Championship, then signing those sort of players from the lower leagues might be the way forward.
Okay. we've obviously dealt briefly there with players potentially coming in. I guess the big question in terms of players outgoing this summer, the big one is obviously the keeper, Bart Bielkowski. Without doubt, Town's prized asset. It's got to be worth some money. He's still a year on his contract. We know people came in for him in January. He's already been linked with Wolves so far this week. That would seem highly unlikely. I don't know what you think about that, Stu, but where do you stand on the Bielkowski debate? Keep or sell?
Town are in a very strong position. You're right, he's got a year left on his contract, but it's effectively 2 because he's got one of those 12-month extension clauses in there. So he's a protected asset for essentially the next couple of years. Whenever we've spoken to Bart, he's not hidden the fact that he's ambitious and wants to play in the Premier League. And at 29 years of age, his stock is at its all-time highest at the moment. So you wouldn't blame him for being interested in that. But he's got a young family that are very settled in Suffolk, and I don't think he's itching to get away. I don't think he'd be too disappointed if Ipswich kind of rebuffed all offers. So Ipswich are in a pretty strong position there. And you're right, he is their only sellable asset. He's at the moment, going back a couple of years, you had McGoldrick, Murphy, Bishop, a few players that you could see attracting big money offers. Right now, with Bishop's injuries, McGoldrick's injuries, Bart's probably the only player that they could really sort of command a decent fee for this summer. So if the budget is tight and if Mick's got to raise his own funds to strengthen other areas of the team and the right offers come in for Bart, then they might just be tempted to cash in on him. The question would be whether they replaced him if that did happen. I get the feeling that Mick would be quite happy to go with Dean Gherkin and maybe invest that money in some of those other areas of the team, bigger priorities as we've discussed, midfield up front. But going to the Wolves link, first viewing it would seem highly unlikely considering where Wolves finished last season, but they seem to be preparing to splash a bit of money this summer. Let's talk about the Portuguese super agent who's kind of brokering a lot of the deals for them at the moment. Paul Lambert'S future in doubt, so that'd be an interesting one for sure.
Okay, well, in terms of Bielkowski, we're currently running a poll on our website. Several questions you can vote on there in terms of whether or not they should sell him, how much he's worth, and whereabouts they should sell him to. So make sure you vote on that. Now, I know Stu's very busy at the moment, so we better wrap this up. Just leave me to say we're hoping this is going to be a weekly feature. It won't always be the same people. Obviously, Stuart will always be involved as he's the man in the know when it comes to Town. So check back with us next week, and in the meantime, make sure you vote in our big end of season survey that Stuart's put together online. 20 questions. You can really have your say on the state of Town, and we'll be using those results to field quite a lot of stories next week. Just thanks for joining us. I've been Mark Heath, sports editor here, and Stuart Watson, the chief football writer and Ipswich Town scribe. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.